Cole Matthews pressed his back against the barn door, rifle trembling in his weathered hands as voices echoed through the rain-soaked darkness outside. Behind him, the Apache woman clutched her infant close, her dark eyes reflecting the same desperation he'd carried for 3 years. "They know we're here," she whispered, and Cole realized that protecting this stranger and her child might cost him everything, or finally give him something worth living for again. Cole Matthews pressed his weathered palm against the barn door, listening to the storm rage outside his Montana ranch. At 42, he moved through life like a ghost haunting his own property. 3 winters had passed since fever took his wife Sarah and their infant son, leaving him with nothing but empty rooms and the mechanical routine of keeping cattle alive. The rain hammered against the roof with biblical fury. Lightning split the darkness every few seconds, illuminating a world that had lost all meaning for him. He should check the livestock. The storm could spook them, send them crashing through fences or huddling together until the weakest ones suffocated. But honestly, Cole barely cared if he lost half his herd tonight. Still, habit pulled him into the downpour. The cold bit through his jacket immediately, soaking him to the bone within seconds. He trudged toward the pasture, boots squelching in mud that tried to swallow his ankles. The cattle had gathered near the far fence, their eyes reflecting white terror in the lightning flashes. He counted heads automatically, his mind elsewhere. 23, all accounted for. Well, almost all. A sound reached him through the thunder, something that didn't belong. Not cattle lowing or wind howling, but something softer, more desperate. Cole froze, water streaming down his face as he strained to listen. There it was again, coming from inside the barn. He'd locked that barn himself 3 hours ago. Nobody had any reason to be on his property, especially not in weather that could kill a man. His hand instinctively moved to the rifle slung across his shoulder as he approached the heavy wooden doors. The sound came again, unmistakably human. A whimper, weak and pained. Cole's jaw tightened. Probably some drifter seeking shelter. He'd run them off like all the others. His property wasn't a charity house, and he sure wasn't in the mood for company. He yanked open the barn door, rifle raised, ready to bark orders at whatever fool had broken into his sanctuary. Instead, he found something that stopped his heart cold. An Apache woman lay collapsed in the hay, her dark hair matted with blood and rain. She couldn't be more than 25, but her face carried the weight of someone who'd seen hell up close. Her clothes were torn, stained with mud and worse things. She clutched something against her chest, a bundle wrapped in what looked like pieces of her own shirt. The bundle moved. Then it cried. That sound hit Cole like a physical blow. High, thin, desperate, exactly like his own son's cries during those final fever-racked nights. His rifle trembled in his hands as memories crashed over him. Sarah's pale face, tiny fingers going still, the silence that followed. But this baby was alive. Very much alive and very unhappy about being cold, wet, and hungry. The woman's eyes opened, meeting his with a mixture of terror and defiant protection that reminded him of a cornered wolf defending her cubs. She tried to speak, but only managed a whisper in what he assumed was Apache. Then, in broken English, "Please, my son." Cole should have turned around, should have pretended he never saw them. Helping an Apache woman meant signing his own death warrant if anyone found out. The local cavalry didn't ask questions first. They shot first and sorted out the details later. Every rational part of his brain screamed at him to walk away, bar the door, and let nature take its course. Instead, he found himself lowering the rifle. Maybe it was the baby's cries. Maybe it was seeing that fierce maternal love he remembered from Sarah. Or maybe after 3 years of feeling nothing, any emotion, even fear, felt better than the endless gray, nothing that had become his existence. "Can you walk?" he asked, already knowing what choice he'd made, what choice he had to make, even if it killed him. What Cole didn't know was that outside, riders were already searching the storm-lashed countryside, following tracks that led straight to his door. The woman could barely stand, but she managed it with the kind of stubborn determination that only comes from protecting something more important than your own life. Cole wrapped his jacket around her shoulders, feeling how she trembled, Whether from cold pain or fear, he couldn't tell. Probably all three. Getting them to the house meant crossing 30 yards of open ground in a storm that could hide an army of searchers. Every step felt like walking through a minefield. The woman, he still didn't know her name, clutched her baby with one arm and leaned heavily on him with the other. Her breathing came in short, sharp gasps that told him she was hurt worse than she was letting on. Inside his house, Cole felt like he was committing some kind of sacred violation. Nobody had crossed this threshold since Sarah died. The room still held her presence, her sewing basket by the window, her favorite cup unwashed in the sink, the baby cradle he'd never had the heart to burn or give away. Now this Apache woman stood dripping on Sarah's clean floors, holding a living child in the same space where his own son had drawn his last breath. It should have felt like betrayal. Instead, it felt like the house was breathing again for the first time in 3 years. "Sit," he said, pointing to the chair by the fireplace. She hesitated, dark eyes scanning the room like she was memorizing escape routes. Smart woman. Trust could get you killed out here? Cole built up the fire while she nursed the baby. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, making everything feel unreal. Like maybe this was all some fever dream brought on by too much whiskey and not enough human contact. But the woman was real enough, real and hurt and scared. When he brought her water, she drank like someone who hadn't seen clean liquid in days. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped the cup. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ayana." Her voice was hoarse but steady. She looked down at the baby. "This is Dakota." Friend to everyone. Cole didn't speak Apache, but he'd heard enough to recognize some names. The irony wasn't lost on him, naming your child friend to everyone when everyone wanted you dead. "How long since you've eaten?" She held up 3 fingers. 3 days. No wonder she looked ready to collapse. Cole heated beans and cornbread, watching her wolf down the food with desperate efficiency. She ate like someone who'd learned not to waste opportunities, keeping one eye on the door and one hand always touching her son. Then there's the matter of her wounds. Blood had soaked through her shirt in several places. When she finally let him examine her, Cole found cuts and bruises that painted a clear picture. Someone had hurt her deliberately. Recently. The torn fabric clutched in her fist included a piece of blue wool with brass buttons. Cavalry issue. "Soldiers did this?" he asked. Her eyes went hard as flint. "They came at dawn, said we were hostile." The word came out like poison. "My husband fought them. My husband died." The story came in fragments over the next few hours. A peaceful Apache band, trying to make it through winter without trouble. Cavalry unit looking for promotions and glory, deciding that a small group of families made perfect targets. The kind of battle that would look good in reports but leave children orphaned and women running for their lives. Ayana had hidden under her husband's body while soldiers ransacked their camp. When they left, she was alone, pregnant, and facing a Montana winter with nothing but the clothes on her back. She'd walked for days, following streams and avoiding roads, going into labor during a blizzard that should have killed her. Makes sense, right? That she'd end up in his barn. Sometimes the worst storms drive people to the most unlikely shelters. But here's what Cole couldn't figure out. Why was he helping her? 3 years of carefully cultivated numbness, and suddenly he's harboring fugitives like some kind of underground railroad conductor. One baby's cry and his whole survival strategy crumbled like a house built on sand. Ayana seemed to understand his confusion better than he did. While Dakota slept, she watched Cole with eyes that had seen too much but somehow hadn't gone dead yet. "You lost child," she said. It wasn't a question. Cole's throat tightened. The cradle in the corner might as well have been a neon sign advertising his tragedy. Fever took them both, wife and son. She nodded slowly. Apache believe souls of dead want living to find peace, not carry guilt forever. Well, that was a conversation starter he hadn't expected. Cole had spent 3 years perfecting his guilt, polishing it until it gleamed like his best rifle. The idea that Sarah and little Michael might actually want him to move forward felt almost blasphemous. Your people have interesting ideas about grief. Your people have interesting ideas about everything. Ayana's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile under different circumstances. Like thinking Apache are dangerous when we just want to live quietly. The next morning brought news that made Cole's blood run cold. His neighbor, Bill Hartley, rode up with information that local cavalry units were offering $50 for any Apache captured alive, $100 for information leading to captures. $50. More than Cole made in 6 months of ranching. Hartley eyed Cole's extra provisions with the kind of suspicious attention that meant trouble. You've been buying a lot of supplies lately, enough for more than one person. Man's gotta eat. Sure he does. Just seems like you'd need help eating all that food. After Hartley left, Cole found Ayana had heard every word from her hiding spot behind the kitchen wall. Her face showed no surprise, only the resigned acceptance of someone who'd expected this moment from the beginning. You can turn us in, she said quietly. $50 is good money. The fact that she even suggested it made Cole angrier than he'd been in years. Not at her, at himself for being the kind of man who'd given her reason to expect betrayal. I'm not turning anybody in. Then they will find us anyway, and they will kill you too. She was probably right. Harboring Apache fugitives was treason in the eyes of most Montana folk. But something had shifted in Cole during the long night of watching her care for Dakota. Something he'd thought died with his family had started breathing again. For the first time in 3 years, he had something worth protecting. Something worth fighting for. Something worth living for. Outside, storm clouds gathered again on the horizon, and Cole wondered if Hartley's visit was just the beginning. Because men like Hartley didn't forget suspicious details, and $50 made people awfully creative about connecting dots that might not actually exist. The question wasn't whether trouble was coming. The question was whether Cole Matthews, the real Cole Matthews, not the hollow shell he'd become, was ready to face it. Cole had exactly 6 hours before Jed Hawkins returned with his answer. 6 hours to decide whether $50 was worth more than his soul. The bounty hunter had made his ultimatum crystal clear that morning. Produce the Apache woman and her brat by sunset, Matthews, or we'll assume you're hiding them. Treason's a hanging offense around these parts. Now Hawkins was gone, but Cole could feel eyes watching from the tree line. The man hadn't gotten his reputation by trusting people to do the right thing. He'd left spotters behind, probably armed with rifles and orders to shoot anyone who tried to run. Ayana stood by the kitchen window, holding Dakota against her chest. She'd been watching the horizon for hours, calculating distances and escape routes with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent months running for her life. You should give us to them, she said, without turning around. Better 2 dead than 3. Cole almost laughed. After everything they'd been through together, she still thought he might choose money over their lives. Then again, maybe that said more about the world they lived in than it did about either of them. Not happening. Then we run? Running means dying tired instead of dying rested? Hawkins tracks people for a living. We wouldn't make it 5 miles before he caught up. Ayana finally turned to face him, and Cole saw something in her expression that made his chest tighten. Not fear. He'd seen plenty of that over the past few weeks. This was different. This was the look of someone preparing to make a sacrifice. I could surrender myself. Tell them you never knew we were here. Say I broke into your barn while you were in town. The fact that she'd even consider it made Cole want to punch something. Preferably Jed Hawkins' face, but a wall would do in a pinch. Ayana. He waited until she met his eyes. I'm not letting them take you. Not today, not ever. Something shifted between them in that moment. Some invisible line got crossed that neither of them could uncross. Cole realized he wasn't just protecting a stranger anymore. Somewhere along the way, this Apache woman and her son had become his family, the only family he had left. But family or not, sentiment wouldn't stop bullets. They spent the afternoon preparing for war. Cole had enough ammunition to hold off a small army, assuming the small army was polite enough to attack one at a time. Ayana proved she knew her way around firearms, checking the rifles with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to shoot before she learned to read. The weird part? Working together felt natural, like they'd been partners for years instead of strangers thrown together by circumstance. My husband taught me to fight, Ayana explained, loading cartridges with steady hands. Said Apache women needed to protect themselves when Apache men couldn't. Smart husband. Too bad smart hadn't been enough to keep him alive when the cavalry came calling. Cole positioned extra rifles around the house, creating firing positions that would let them cover all approaches. The ranch sat on high ground with clear sightlines in every direction. Good for defense, terrible for escape. If Hawkins brought enough men, this would end badly for everyone involved. Then there was the question of Dakota. A crying baby could give away their position or distract them at exactly the wrong moment. But the alternative, leaving him somewhere safe while they fought for their lives, felt like admitting defeat before the battle started. He stays with us, Ayana said, reading Cole's expression. If we die, he dies. If we live, he lives. That's how families work. Families? When was the last time Cole had thought of himself as part of one? The sun started its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of red and gold that reminded Cole uncomfortably of blood and fire. Beautiful evening for a gunfight. That's when Hawkins returned, bringing friends. Cole watched 8 riders emerge from the tree line, spread out in a perfect killing formation. Hawkins sat his horse in the center, that smug smile visible even from 100 yards away. Professional killers, every one of them. Last chance, Matthews, Hawkins called out. Send out the squaw and her brat and we'll make this quick. Cole stepped onto his porch, rifle cradled in his arms. Behind him, Ayana crouched by the window with Dakota pressed against her shoulder. The baby had been eerily quiet all afternoon, like he understood the stakes. Counteroffer, Cole shouted back. You and your boys ride off my land, and I won't put bullets in all of you. Hawkins laughed. 8 against 1? I like those odds. 8 against 2, Ayana called out, her voice carrying across the yard clear as a bell. She stepped into view beside Cole, her own rifle ready. Apache women don't hide from cowards who murdered children. The insult hit its mark. Hawkins' face went dark, and Cole knew talking time was over. The first shot came from the left flank. Cole dove sideways, pulling Ayana down with him, as wood splinters exploded from the doorframe. They rolled inside as gunfire erupted from multiple directions. What happened next lasted maybe 10 minutes, but felt like hours. Cole and Ayana moved through the house like dancers who'd rehearsed this routine for years. She covered the kitchen windows while he fired from the front room. When she ran low on ammunition, he slid cartridges across the floor without breaking his rhythm. When Cole took a graze across his shoulder, Ayana appeared with bandages like she'd been waiting for it. The attackers made their mistake when they tried rushing the back door. Ayana was waiting, and her first shot dropped the lead man like a stone. The second man stumbled over his partner's body, and Cole's bullet found him before he could recover. After that, the survivors lost their enthusiasm for close-quarters fighting. Hawkins, Cole called during a lull in the shooting. You down to 6 men yet, or should I count slower? No answer except a cursing and the sound of horses moving position. The next attack never came. When Cole finally risked looking out the window, he saw dust clouds heading away from his ranch. 8 riders had become 4 and 4, apparently decided $50 wasn't worth dying for. Ayana found him on the porch an hour later, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Dakota gurgled happily in her arms, completely oblivious to how close he'd come to being an orphan. So what now? She asked. Cole smiled. For the first time in 3 years, tomorrow felt like a promise instead of a threat. Now we pack. California's got better weather for raising kids.